There are hundreds of these videos on YouTube titled How to Get Ahead of 99% of People. Some of these videos have millions of views, but the vast majority of people will never be able to get anywhere close to being in the 99th percentile. However, if you are a dentist, it's actually possible, not that hard to do. I did it, and I'm going to show you how. So according to a study done by $dollarsandData.com, they surveyed 4,595 US households, and this was in 2022. They found that if you're under 35, you need to make $465,000 a year in order to make it in the 99th percentile for your age group. Sure, it's going to take some work, but this number is actually very manageable for dentists. My first year out of school, when I was working as an associate, I made about $200,000. But my second year, I bought a practice. As an owner, I was making $700,000 my first year. So in my second year, that put me well above the 99th percentile. The truth is, I'm not actually that hard of a worker when it comes to dentistry. When I owned my practice, for a large portion of the time, I was only working 3 days a week. And I actually was setting my schedule to get out a lot earlier than most dentists did. I'll talk about that later in the video. It's really not that hard when you own a practice if you just do a couple things right to do really, really well. Now, a lot of dentists graduate when they're around 27 to 28 years old. At the age of 27, you actually only need $243,000 a year in order to be in the 99th percentile. Of course, you have to take into account student loan payments, but it's actually realistic for a dentist to shoot for 99th percentile. So the first thing and the most important thing to keep in mind is that if you want to have this type of income, you're gonna have to own your own practice. You can't be working as an associate for someone else. You definitely can't be working for a DSO. Maybe in your first or second year, if you work extremely hard, you could get your income up to, 300, 350. Once you subtract student loans, you're down to, maybe 270. And because at 27, you only need to make 243 to be in the 99th percentile, maybe you could be in the percentile as an associate temporarily, but long-term, you're definitely going to need to own your own practice. The reality is that practice owners just make a lot more money than associates. I actually made a video that I will post in the description that goes through and actually looks at some specific numbers and shows how you can actually make a lot more as a practice owner. But trust me, you can make a lot more as an owner than when you're working as an associate. Now, I will be the first to say that success is not just about money. It's not just about how much money you make. There's so much more to success is about having the resources, which includes money, but also the time to do the things you want to do and the energy left over to actually enjoy doing those things. Most dental associates don't even get the opportunity to know what it's like to have the freedom that comes from being an owner. Ownership not only gives you the income that's required, but it gives you an amount of freedom and control that allows you to do the things you want to do and do them the way you want to do it. When I was working as an associate, it was not uncommon for me to work until 5:30 or 6 some days. But when I became an owner, I decided I want to be able to go to the gym at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then be home by 5 o'clock for supper and to spend time with my family. So I decided I'm going to see my last patient and be done by 3:30. And when you're an owner, you can make those kind of decisions. And even though I ended my schedule at 3:30 every day, I still, I did really well. To be fair, I did work through lunch quite a bit just because I'm a big fan of doing same day treatment. And, I'll add patients on and I'll work into lunch, but I'm fine with that because I don't need an entire hour to go take lunch. I'd rather just get the work done, be done at 3:30, have time to go to the gym after work, go on a run, go on a bike ride, and then be home to spend time with my family and do other things that I enjoy. So the first step as a dentist, if you want to have that kind of freedom, is going to be finding a practice and becoming a practice owner. If you want to stand out and be in that 99th percentile of people, you want to start as soon as possible. Buy a practice right away. I bought it my second year out of school. I know a lot of dentists who buy practices immediately after graduating. It's a little more difficult, but it's possible to do that. You're never going to feel ready no matter how long you wait. The longer you wait, actually, in some ways, the more difficult it becomes because you have other obligations in your life, especially like before you've bought a house, before you've had kids. That's the best time to buy your practice and get established. I would start right away. Don't wait for this imaginary future where you think maybe you'll be more ready if you work as an associate for a couple of years. It's not really how it works. You just need to get started. While other people are trading their time for money, you're going to be building a life that you actually love. Now, you don't need to specialize in order to be successful. You don't need to become an oral surgeon. You don't need to become an endodontist. You don't actually even have to do any difficult procedures. Like, implants are great, but you don't have to do those to be successful. All I did was bread and butter, basic general dentistry. When I was working as an associate, I did some endo, but when I became a practice owner, I was too busy with other stuff. I just referred out all of my endo except for the extremely easy anteriors. Now, I do like doing extractions. So basically any patient that didn't require general anesthesia, I would do the extractions in clinic. But I wasn't doing anything crazy. If you were to look at my procedure report, I honestly make the vast majority of my money from crowns. And most of those are just simple single crowns. When I can, I try to do 2 or 3, 4 at a time, but a huge portion of those are just single crowns. The key to making it work is going to be getting good at treatment planning. Every patient you see, you want to make sure you're doing a comprehensive treatment plan on. Don't see a patient and say, well, they've got a lot. I'll get started today, and next time they come in, I'll treatment plan more. No, you need to take this seriously. Every single thing you see, you need to treatment plan. Don't be afraid of telling patients that they have decay. You need to treatment plan everything you see. And don't be afraid to recommend the best treatment for patients. Don't see a patient and say, well, I don't think they can afford to do a crown or an implant, so I'm gonna treatment plan a basic MODB filling. Don't do that. If that tooth would be better served with a crown, treatment plan the crown and make sure the patient knows how important that is. You don't want to have to put your patients at risk of, maybe they're on vacation and they bite down on something and their tooth fractures and now they can't enjoy the rest of their vacation because their tooth is hurting. Don't give patients inferior treatment when you have the ability to do a good quality zirconia crown. There's times to do, occlusal fillings and MODs and, a buccal filling here or there. But if you're doing this large filling, you need to take a step back and say, hey, maybe this should be a buildup because honestly, this tooth is going to break. It's extremely common that I'll get started on a filling and it'll just get deeper and deeper. And I just have to set the patient up in the chair and say, hey, this cavity is actually really big. If we don't put a crown on this, the chances are you're going to be at a Thanksgiving meal and you're going to bite into something and your tooth is going to break and we're going to be out of town and there's going to be no one to help you. So we should just put the crown on today and get it done. And a huge portion of the patients say, okay, all right, let's just get it done. You need to focus on comprehensive treatment plans and then make sure that the patients follow through with that work that you're treatment planning. Your ability to convert those patients into accepting their treatment is going to be what sets you apart. Now, you don't have to sell some kind of procedure or something to the patient that they don't actually need. This is not like used car salesman tactics. You are simply telling the patient, if you don't do this, if you don't get this work done, you're likely going to need a denture in a few years. If you don't do this crown, you're going to be out to eat with your friends and your tooth is going to break and you're going to be embarrassed. Decay and fractured teeth are not a joke. Don't joke around with patients about this. Make sure the patients know that what they have is not normal and that they need to get this taken care of if they want to keep their teeth. Remind the patients that if they don't get this done and that decay gets to the nerve, they're going to be in some serious pain. And if they can get it done now before we get to that point, they're likely to save themselves a huge heartache. If you're just honest with the patient and you're real with them and you tell them what the consequences of not following through with this treatment are, the patients are going to want to get the work done. Once you've treatment planned and got the patient to accept the treatment, the next thing is going to be actually doing the treatment. Same day treatment. Don't put that treatment off to another day. If the patient is there in the office and you have any way of making time, maybe that means skipping lunch. It doesn't matter, but you need to do everything you can that day. Every patient that you let walk out the door without getting their treatment started is one patient that might not come back. If you can fit that patient onto your schedule that day, not only are you freeing up space on your schedule, not only are you increasing the production for today, but you're freeing up space on your future schedule so that you can get additional patients scheduled. Chances are that patient had to take off work, that patient had to find childcare, that patient had to do some things in order to make it to your office. While they're there in the chair, they're going to want to just get that work done. And if you can offer it to them the same day, a large number of those patients are going to accept. Hygiene patients can be extremely profitable. Not only is it work that you don't have to personally do yourself, you're going to be hiring your hygienist to do those cleanings and take the radiographs. You just have to come in and do the exam. But hygiene appointments are also where you find your treatment. Your goal as a dentist, at minimum, should be to have 2 hygiene schedules filled each day. Some do 3 or 4. A packed hygiene schedule is not only about filling the schedule today, but that's what gives you treatment for tomorrow. Every patient needs to be rescheduled. Do not let a single patient leave without getting rescheduled for their next hygiene appointment. Some patients might say, well, I don't know my work schedule yet. I might be traveling. I don't know what the school schedule is going to look like for my kids. It doesn't matter. You need to get them on the schedule. When that date comes up, you're going to have your front desk call to confirm appointments. And if at that time they need to change to a different time or whatever, that's fine. But if you don't have them on the schedule, they're going to forget to call and make that appointment, and you're not going to remember to call them. You need to have them on the schedule before they leave. And then that will be a reminder to your front office in 6 months to call that patient and reschedule and confirm that appointment. Set up your systems so that it's impossible for a patient to check out until they have their next appointment scheduled. Every patient gets fluoride. The ADA is clear that fluoride is beneficial for not just kids, but adults. Regardless of whether that patient's insurance is going to cover fluoride or not, you need to make sure that that patient is receiving fluoride. If they have to pay a little bit extra out of pocket for that, that's fine. You're doing them an amazing service by giving them that fluoride. Fluoride is in the best interest for the patient, and for you, it's an additional $30 to $40, sometimes $50 extra in pure profit per patient. Fluoride varnish costs like 25 cents, and the hygienist is already seeing the patient. She's going to put the fluoride on, or the assistant in the worst case, and you don't have to do anything. Also, don't sleep on sealants. Sealants are amazing. They're one of the best ways to prevent occlusal decay. Make sure your patients know that you're not just the type of dentist that wants to react to things, but you're the type of dentist that wants to prevent them from getting those diseases in the first place. Make sure they know how incredible the technology of sealants really is and how amazing it is at preventing decay. Doing sealants on a patient could easily be an extra $150 to $200 in profit, and it's work that you don't even have to do. It's work that your assistants are going to be doing. Focus on your hygiene schedule. Make sure you're retaining your patients, and make sure every patient is receiving fluoride and sealants if they have unsealed occlusal surfaces. Now, there's going to come a point where you want to have additional new patients being added to the schedule. Assuming you're being really smart about retention and making sure your patients are getting rescheduled, it's not as important that you have new patients as, for instance, some of the DSOs that are terrible at retention. Many of the DSO offices they're such poor quality that the patients don't want to come back. And so they have to really focus on marketing and advertising to get new patients in the door. Now, every single practice is going to be different. Like, depending on your location, if you're more visible, less visible, you might have to spend more time on marketing. But the reality is, when you own a private practice and you're providing high quality treatment and you're treating your patients right, you are not going to need to spend that much on marketing. The best marketing you can do is making sure you're taking care of the patients that you have. If you're doing good work, your patients are going to be telling others about your practice, and those patients are going to come. The key is that once you have that new patient call and schedule appointment, you want to make sure that you're treatment planning properly and that you have them scheduled to come back for their next appointment. Patient retention is key. I know some corporate offices that get, 100 to 200 new patients a month, but they don't keep their patients, so it doesn't matter. The most important metric to track is not how many new patients you get, but how many of your patients you're holding on to. Now, if you decide you're going to do a startup and start a practice from scratch, then yeah, you're going to have to focus a lot more on marketing. But if you're smart and you buy a dental practice that already has an existing patient base, you might not even have to do any marketing for the first couple of years because you're just going to be focusing on treating those patients that you already have. Now, if you really want to be in the top 99th percentile, don't get distracted with the idea of trying to buy another dental practice. Trying to own more than one practice is going to divide your attention and make everything you do less effective. It's going to increase your overhead, and it's likely not even going to dramatically increase your revenue. It's going to increase the amount of time that you have to be spending working on the business, and it's likely not going to have much of a material impact on your profit. Instead, the strategy you should follow is take the practice that you have and build it. Build up those hygiene schedules. Hire another hygienist and make sure that every new patient that calls in, you have availability to get them in ASAP on the schedule and get started. Ideally, you want to be at the point where you have so many patients that you can't see them all yourselves. And at that point, you can hire an associate to come in and help you. Having one large, profitable practice is absolutely almost always. I know a dentist who has bought like 3 or 4 practices and he's having a hard time finding associates to work at those practices, and he's having to jump between the different offices. Like he looks like he's about to like pull all his hair out and go crazy because he is spread so thin and he's not even making that much money. Don't try to spread yourself out over multiple locations, but build up this one powerful, strong office that has a high production and a high profit. Eventually, if you build this thing up, you're going to be getting your overhead lower and lower because as your production increases, it becomes easier to lower your overhead. And not only are you going to have a higher gross revenue, but you're going to have a much higher net profit as well, and really net profit is what you should be caring about. Another power that you have in order to get into the 99th percentile is by selling a practice. The reality is you're not as important as you think, and it's not going to be that hard to transition your practice over to another dentist. If you want to move or you want to spend some time doing something else, it's incredibly easy to sell a practice. If you've been smart and have been building up your hygiene base and you have this huge amount of patients on the schedule, it's going to be super easy to sell your practice because there's going to be other dentists who see that and say, well, he's got 3 hygienists with a full schedule. That's the kind of practice I want to buy. If you have a practice like this, it's not uncommon to sell your practice for, $2 million. I sold my first practice for like more than double what I paid for it. Truly wealthy people have learned the skill of buying assets, increasing their value, and reselling them to the marketplace. There's a reason why the guys on Shark Tank are not out, applying for jobs. They're buying businesses. Start looking at the idea of building equity in your practice and then selling it. Generally, you're going to sign something like a 10 to 15 mile non-compete for probably, 3 to 5 years. So you want to make sure that you're able to move or else have a little bit of a drive. But it's not difficult to sell your practice and then go around and buy another one, build it up, and then sell it. I know dentists who have bought and sold 4 or 5 practices, and they keep doing it, and each time they're making money. Oftentimes, you're going to be buying a practice from an older dentist who's been slowing down and kind of has been losing the motivation to treatment plan. Someone who hasn't been treatment planning, someone who hasn't been doing crowns, someone who's been doing large fillings because they don't feel like having to deal with filling out the lab forms. They feel like they've made enough money and they kind of want to lay back and take it easy. You find someone like that, you take over the practice, you come in, you can double, you can triple production. And if you resell that practice, you're going to have double or triple the value of that practice. If you take on this mindset that the dental practice that you own is not just a place you work, but it's an asset that you're building and putting value into, there's literally no limit to the amount of potential that practice has. You don't need to be any type of amazing dentist who's doing full arch implant cases or anything crazy. You just need to get in and find somewhere that needs a dentist that the dentist hasn't really been working that hard. You come in and you just do the normal general dentistry. You're doing your fillings, you're doing your crowns, you're doing extractions, a few dentures, and you've doubled production. Don't try to chase fads and all these extra procedures and things. Just focus on helping patients become healthier. If you get to the point that, you want to do some clear aligners, or maybe you do want to do implants because you enjoy them, that's great. The vast majority of people have absolutely no chance to ever make it to the 99th percentile. But when you're a dentist, it's really not that hard. You've already done the work of making it through dental school. You already know all the skills you need to know to make it happen. You just need to get started. Start looking for a practice to buy today. If you're not sure how to get started, reach out. That's what I do. I help dentists buy practices. If you're serious about getting ahead, make sure to visit my website. You can check out some of the resources that I have. Don't chase distractions. Stick to your plan. Make sure you're owning your practice, that you're keeping the profit that you're making, and it's not going to be hard for you to make it to the top 99th percentile. All right, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment telling about your journey and how you're trying to buy a practice. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure to leave a review. It's time to get started. Take action. It's time to become a practice owner.